Alrighty, I think that is 10:02. So welcome everybody to this particular session, which I think we're going to find of great interest and of great value to our industry here in South Africa. First off, around the table, just some introductions. Neil, why don't you just give a 30-second high level of yourself and your company, Amplify 5?
Morning, everyone. My name's Neil Drummond. I'm the Managing Director, Chief Operating Officer of Amplify 5. I think when Rod was looking to put the panel together, he was talking about tight budgets in the UK. And he typecast me as putting a Scottish person on the panel just to make sure we were all on the same page. So despite my accent, I've been in South Africa now for 14 years across a number of the larger BPOs. And 3 years ago, was part of the team that set up Amplify 5 from a standing start now to just short of 900 people. And as you'll have seen recently, winning the Emerging Operator Award. So something we're really proud of from a startup. So thanks for joining.
Well done on that one, Neil. And next time I'm in Cape Town, which will be early December, I'll pop by and see you all again. William, I know we got you out of bed early this morning, and I hope that's coffee you got in that mug. Would you just give us a quick heads up on Ascensos and where you are?
Yes, sure. William Carson, Director of Market Engagement at Ascensos, now a First Source Group company. We've been in South Africa for, just over 2.5 years, grown very quickly, which kind of fits the brief of the discussion in some ways, Rod. And the company was established 2013 and is always focused exclusively on retail and e-commerce. Also, like Neil and Amplify 5, grateful recipient of an award as top BPO operator at the BPO2SA Alchemy Awards a few weeks ago, and it was fantastic to be in South Africa and feel the energy in Joburg, but also in Cape Town, obviously where we're based.
Excellent, thanks for that. And last but not least, Kobus, you've been around this industry for almost as long as I have, in and out of the BPO space, and about to go third time in. So won't you give us a quick heads up, please?
Yeah, Rod, thank you very much, and welcome to everybody. Thanks for joining us. You're still beating me, Rod, in terms of tenure in this industry, but yes. So founder and CEO of Trilogy BPO. The name says it all. It's Trilogy because it's the third one that I'll be starting, and hopefully see what happens. Everybody might know me as Digital Tribe. When we started Digital Tribe 3 years ago, then Ascensos acquired Digital Tribe, and we sort of helped Ascensos grow, as William just mentioned now. And First Source then acquired Ascensos again. So it's quite a sort of a chain reaction. So yeah, some people might think I'm absolutely crazy to start a new startup BPO in this crazy market right now, but we think there's a few things we can try and disrupt and see what happens.
Excellent, thank you, gentlemen. I'm going to kick off the show with our absent guest, and in fact, the starting point of this discussion was a podcast that I'd seen with Dave Rumble in it. I asked Dave to participate today, but unfortunately he's presenting in Hungary today. But on Friday afternoon, I did get hold of him and we did a short video interview. So Dave's got perspectives and views about the impact of the recently announced changes in the British budget, the UK budget, and how that will impact the CX industry. So if you'll bear with me, I'm going to pull up a video clip of Dave. Here we go. The first video clip is the economic implications. So over to you, Dave. Thanks for making time for us. I know that sadly you won't be able to join us on the webinar live, but if we could just get your views on two components that I've been reading about, and I watched your podcast on the CX Files with Mark and Peter. There are two things I think which have created a lot of interest out here in South Africa, and just having come out of the last 2 days of the BPO2SA conference, these are right on top of the agenda. The two things: the impact of the recently announced budget in the UK. How is that going to affect the contact center, the CX, the customer service industry, and then at the same time, the double whammy, the employment practices. So if you could just give us a heads up on that. You won't be with us on the webinar, but it'll be discussion points. So let's start with the budget, the implication of the budget.
Yeah, and I'll have to say, I'll fess up straight off. Look, this isn't, hopefully, is not a politically attuned commentary. So this isn't about any form of
business as usual. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think, look, from a budgetary perspective, look, some really kind of interesting big points have come out. Clearly, the economy in the UK is challenged, and there is a requirement to reflate and encourage investment. So I think, look, there are some pretty big things that are in there. One around investment and capital that would be coming into the industry, and particularly into the services sector, and the returns that investors would need to make on investments in in technology and infrastructure. So I think investment horizons and the expectations of returns on investments, I think, are probably going to be higher. And what that means is clearly costs need to be lower to generate the higher returns. So I think we've got a dimension which goes into capital and investment. And then on the other side of the coin, clearly the private sector is supporting quite a lot of, quite a big investment and quite a lot of ambition in terms of the investment cycle from a public sector perspective. And so the changes in employer taxation, obviously the tax on national insurance, but more importantly, the lowering of the threshold in which tax is paid, I think, to start to have quite a material effect on people's ability to cover the cost and deal with the cost, because there's absolutely no way that those costs are not going to get reflected in higher charges. And so I think we've got these two economic challenges that have come through and flow through in the budget that inevitably will force organizations, both from an investment and from an operating cost perspective, to consider lower cost locations. And this is where we get into something which is much more interesting, which is on foreign exchange. So the pound is performing not very well. Obviously, we've had the election in the US. So pound against the dollar, not great. Pound against the euro, not great. But the pound against the rand has stayed pretty static. We're still in the early 20s. And so commercial certainty around those investments and securing the benefit of those investments in South Africa start to, kind of push South Africa ahead of the Philippines, where traditionally, in India, where we're in dollars. And so you can see capital, OPEX, and foreign exchange, and the lack of volatility there driving a big interest commercially into South Africa. And I certainly sense that. I certainly see it in deal flow and interest in looking at South Africa as a location. So large numbers of jobs and lots of operations considering and putting South Africa as a #1 destination. So I think it'll prove. This one, I think, will prove a pivotal budget for South Africa, and I think there's a great opportunity for additional growth from the UK. I think,
you see that impacting in the shorter term. I mean, immediately, where the buyers are starting to look now in the wake of economic realities.
Yeah, so I sense some of those organisations that have said, well, look, we're prepared to put a proportion of our estate into South Africa, so 20-30%, and we'll have it as part of a wider strategy, but we'll retain some outsource onshore. I think those days, I think this will start to happen immediately, is that actually I'm not going to consider an onshore outsource contract. I'm going to go straight to, I'll go nearshore, offshore.
Okay.
So, the UK, those BPOs with a domestic presence in the UK, I think without something in South Africa are going to be compromised, because I think unless you're doing something that's very specialist, that work inevitably. So I think you'll see people who are already there making a decision to increase what they've got there.
And ramping up.
And then other organizations potentially decamping from the Philippines or India, where you've got this pressure on currency and dollar. So I just think that there's this kind of natural pendulum swing. And I think you're right. I think it's immediate. I think it's,
that's good news. And I said, on the back of the conference we've just finished, the industry is ripe, ready, and able to deliver on it. Okay, give me a second. We'll just back to screen and share. And there we go. First off, Neil, if you would unmute for a second, I'd really like your opinion on the points that Dave raised in that little clip from your organization's perspective.
Yeah.
What are you seeing?
I think the significant things are the cost on UK businesses to provide the service themselves. It's just prohibitive. The national insurance increase and the lowering of the threshold of that increase. We've already seen a number of the retailers call out the impact, and in retail, and I guess in hospitality as well, that they're going to have a lot of people around the minimum wage or the national living wage. And that living wage, you know, I think it's £12.10. That's 275 rand on the current exchange rate that Dave references there. That therein is the opportunity. Can we provide a fully loaded service for less than they can pay just for the bum on the seat in the UK? And I think we know the answer. There's also the opportunity of far more complex roles to come with that. It doesn't just need to be the volume from utilities businesses and retailers, because this crunch is really impacting all scales of business. You know, we've heard from the Tesco's of this world, but there's a lot of smaller retailers, there's a lot of smaller and medium enterprises that this is really going to hit hard, and therein is our opportunity to from the cost play initially, but from the service,
the quality as well. I think, William, if you would come in, I mean, you and your organization have speciality or focus in the retail sector. Have you already felt impact of that in terms of potential customers or existing customers looking to ramp up in the wake of these changes?
Not specifically in the wake in some ways, Rod. I think that obviously South Africa offers has been attractive to a number of our existing clients as well as new prospects over the last 2-3 years. I think the trigger of the budget and the challenges there undoubtedly is going to add pressure to brands that just simply are looking at their operations and thinking, you know, maybe they've been holding on to some of those real estate elements, those workforce elements that they are really challenged with going into 2025. And it just becomes a challenge that's too far for their board, and the request goes out to from the CFO, guys, you've got to find a more cost-effective way of managing this aspect. As I often say, they'll have a budget to go and market their goods or services, a budget to go and sell them, but they won't have a budget specifically that they'll say is just for caring for the customer. And that will drive them to say, well, where can we get the services in a way that is far more cost effective against what we're trying to achieve? And I think is then unequivocal because of what's happened more recently. I think there will always be some clients that simply, either at scale or scope, just feel, actually, I will always have UK. And we genuinely have a number of clients in the UK who consider that to be the best place for them and what they're doing. But undoubtedly, once you hit a certain scale point, you really have to consider all your options.
Excellent. Kobus, going to bring you in now. This is your third time into the BPO space. So you're a matured startup, put it that way. Do you see opportunity not only in the voice arena, but particularly in the digital space, which I know from past experiences your area of expertise or speciality? Pick it up from there in your observations.
Yeah, Rod, thanks very much. Yes. So, you know, after Ascensos, I promised myself it was going to be the last one. And I guess I can't help myself, because I reckon at the time, for those 3 years, obviously that was the big wave. The business was hitting South Africa in the face, really. And with digital and autonomy, and especially, you know, everybody stays away from the elephant in the room around AI and AI agents and enablement and so on. And we haven't matured there at all. I think it's still going to take a bit of a time for those technologies to mature to the extent where have a bit of a devastating impact on our market in terms of jobs. So there's still a bit of a runway there. And also we feel, or I felt the opportunity there, particularly now coming through, is South Africa has matured to a tier 1 outsourcing or offshoring environment. And the large BPOs, there's so much consolidation happening, with the large BPOs coming in and acquiring all the local South African smaller operators that I always refer to as those intimate operators, where clients who's not outsourcing hundreds and hundreds of FTEs or seats can find a place where they feel comfortable with, where there's that high touch, high love, account management and account care sort of environment. So that's really, I feel, what's happening now with this market is that wannabe market is going to be highly stimulated as well. So it's not just going to be that tier 1 large environments where the big BPO operators are. I refer to that as that WWE SmackDown ring. You know, everybody is in that ring and they're all fighting each other for business and they chucking each other out to be able to win. We're not in that. We're staying out of that ring. We built ourselves a different ring, and where there's sort of smaller operators, more intimate, going after smaller campaigns. And where I do want to agree with Neil as well is that non-voice environment. So the back office, I think the back office environment, the KPO environment is going to be stimulated more as well, because that is being impacted by the UK budget in a big way also. We're literally focusing right now mostly on the UK, because I think that's going to, you know, with every tsunami, there's a couple of small waves following as well. So we're catching those small waves or the smaller waves. Digital, definitely. You know, when we launched Digital Tribe, it was about digital, it was about autonomous, but it was about 3 years too early and nobody really adopted it. And I feel over the next 3 to 5 years, that's really going to be the adoption. So in South Africa, BPO are going to have to shift and pivot a bit from, yes, humans. There we're well positioned in the service industry, but we're going to have to become very smart in terms of the tech as well and the AI to be able to almost provide an AI or a AI assisted humans with a human in the loop still. So I still see, and I can be totally wrong on this, but I'm backing the fact that for the next 3 years or so, AI is going to have to be almost secured by humans. So when an AI fails, there's a human breakout, there's a human assisting the AI. And so we still see that in terms of next 3 to even 5 years. What people don't realize, AI needs integration. So AI needs data and systems integration. And if you look at the last 3, 4, 5 retailers or healthcare companies or any environments, it's actually very difficult to integrate into those backend systems to do full-on AI agents, and that's going to take some time as well. So we still feel there's a bit there's still a bit of a runway where humans are going to be.
Let's pick up on that, William. Your point. You know, I think one of the comments I made, and I had Peter Ryan in stitches when I used the phrase, and he subsequently used it, over-botterization. Miss of
with
AI.
a Z or an S, though, Rod, with a Z or an S.
Yes, well, in Peter's world be a Z, but in our world be an S. But my view, and I think it bears out what Kobus is saying, but I think your view would be really valuable, is that this uncontrolled, if you like, or amateurish deployments of AI, bots, etc., we're starting to see kickback from the public, particularly in the UK and Europe, saying, no, I need a person.
Yeah, I think
has
so.
this been your experience?
Yeah, I think we obviously deal exclusively in retail and e-commerce, and with that comes quite a lot of emotive engagement from customers, which if you look at it on a process map, order hasn't arrived, that's just a process in some respects. But what that doesn't show is the emotion behind that. And there have been great examples with some of the clients that we look after, where one of our high touch fashion clients, that literally a pair of angel wings didn't turn up for a child for a wedding on a Saturday morning. Now, yeah, I would say, well, we'll get them out to you by Monday, but unfortunately the wedding's the Saturday afternoon. And that took our people to contact our client, the client to contact the local store to put the angel wings in a taxi, and the taxi to drive it down the road to the wedding, and everything was saved. And that's the sort of thing that is genuinely an emotive challenge for the buyer, as the customer. And the idea that something artificial intelligence or automative innovation, as some call it, would actually have delivered properly on that is a nonsense. That said, there are genuinely areas where, like we saw 25 years ago, where IVR could come in and make things more accessible for the customer. And I think we're still some way to finding that natural place in all of these implementations of AI-enabled tech and platforms.
Okay, excellent. Neil, your operation, from what I've seen on my couple of visits to you, tend to be smaller groups of agents servicing quite a large number of clients. Are they high touch, high care in the same sense as we're talking about, where it's a digital failure resulting in a agent assisted interaction?
Yeah,
I don't know. Go for it.
It can be, Rod, but yeah, we tend to have a lot of smaller, more white glove boutique operations here. And I think some of those businesses have been driven into the cost saving opportunities that they previously didn't think were available. Outsourcing and offshoring just was something for the big businesses to do. And I think these recent changes from the budget is going to open up an even bigger market to that. People who it might be 10, 15 seats that they've got sitting in the UK, and they believe it has to be done there. Ultimately, they're probably working remotely or an element of remote work. So the technology is already there for them to be offshored. And it's just around having somebody that sets up the environment for them to do it. I think there are certain parts of a journey, whether it's a cruise that you're booking or a lifestyle holiday for a pensioner, that's never going to be taken away by AI. The agent's journey might be assisted, and we might be prompting them into the right add-ons and how to add value. But ultimately, there's customers of many retail brands, and William has seen this over the years, that could have done what they needed to do, that they make the phone call. They could have done it themselves on the website and self-served, and they've chosen still to speak to that person to get the confidence. And I think Kobus's point's right. We've still got a runway. We've still got a huge opportunity to bring more work to South Africa. We can make it better, absolutely. We can optimize for customers when we get them here. So it's not just about headcount. It is around the customer satisfaction. It's about improving their processes before we even bring them on board. But yeah, our range is anything from 2 seats to 200 seats just now. So we've got quite a diverse range of clients, and that just shows that there's work there for it.
If we start exploring some of the diversity in the opportunity, which takes us into the world of GBS and the non-voice, non-CX space, I want to bring in somebody who's I've been working with fairly closely, and I think is known to everybody, Ros Broom. Ros, you are currently handling a number of transitions from legal into BPO space or GBS space. What is your view on the future for high touch, high care, for example, legal services and other professional services? Why don't you just come in?
Well, I think definitely in terms of what Neil and Kobus have spoken about today, I think that there's a huge opportunity. And yes, as you mentioned, Rod, I'm dealing with a number of clients who have identified that they want to diversify their business and that they would like to start doing some international work. And I think that there is huge opportunity because they will be, to your point, Neil, where it could be as few as 2 or 4 lawyers, as an example. And it's the kind of business that the larger players would definitely not be interested in. But the challenge that I see with the clients that I'm dealing with at the moment is that as a country, I'm not sure that we have a strategy to assist these smaller players in getting into the market. So I think that if you're a huge player and you've got inroads and access to, say, a Dave Rumble, you're great. But in terms of Dave, my players at this stage are not in his league. So my thoughts are, yes, there are huge opportunities, but I think, unless I'm missing something vital, that we need as a country, as a South African industry, some way of pulling all our players together and almost going back to 15 years ago when we went to all the events, and Kobus is giving a big smile here, all those events, and it was kind of country first. And we were out there really banging the drum and saying, come to South Africa. But I wonder if we have got the same impetus and whether we need to strategize in terms of this.
Okay, nice one. Thanks, Ros. Kobus, Ros was pointing at you on this one, so why don't you just come back with a short response on that? And then I'm going to ask Clinton Cohen to come in also with a comment. Kobus first.
Yeah, I think Ros is right in a way. If you look at, if you look at the sort of last 20 years, the market started very small. If you look at, like, what's it, 18 years ago, 19 years ago, the first campaigns was AOL from America. It was Virgin when we brought Virgin here, British Gas. Neil is a result of that. Look at him nowadays, and then the first Indian BPO company was Aegis. We brought Aegis to South Africa, and now the market has matured to such an extent, but we have matured like a good sort of South African wine or a good whiskey. So it wasn't instant, and now you're sitting with all those gaps. I feel the market has matured very nicely, and we are ready for that next phase. We've got a great IT infrastructure for AI and tech to have that balance between humans and tech. But where Ros is correct is we became a bit lazy over the last couple of years because the business was hitting us in the face. So, it was, if you look at the global migration, it was US to India, and then US to Philippines, and then UK, Europe to India, and then to a lesser extent, Philippines. And then they looked at Egypt and South Africa, and that's how we grew. We only became a top destination in BPO in the last couple of years. But prior to that, it was a hard slog. And we put a lot of effort, as Ross said. I was smiling and thinking about those, Rod, you know this as well. My goodness, those outward, no, it was just a hard slog, right? And now all the BPO, the international guys came in, and they feeding off that. They feeding off all that work that was put in. So I think the smaller operators, when Ross was mentioning that, almost need to feed off. It's a bit like you have the whales, like the big BPO companies. And the way I see myself, even if I say it, like a pilot fish, so I'm going to take the business that the big whales don't want. And that is how Neil built a successful business already. I'm not saying Neil is a pilot fish, but it's a bit like that. So the young, especially the younger operators or the smaller mature operators, need to look at that market segment and be very targeted around who they bring on as clients. If you're going to become part of that big WWE ring, that SmackDown ring, as a smaller entrepreneurial enterprise, somebody's going to get hurt. You can't go up against the big boys. Don't go for RFPs that everybody's going for and all of that. Be very targeted. Go and overseas, find a partner, find boots on the street, and go and walk those streets to get to get your deals.
Good point, but now I'm going to throw it at both Neil and William. If we're looking at those 3, 4, 5, 6 seats in specialized niches, whether it is legal services, accounting services, etc., do you see opportunity for these startups to partner with the likes of yourselves, who are not in that smackdown arena, but you're in the high touch, high care, on the ground with representation and good networks in the UK, for example? Do you see opportunities for these startups to actually knock on the door, get around the boardroom table and say, hey, let's do a deal? First, Neil.
Yeah, absolutely, which I think is the answer you would expect me to give, Rod. We've already seen some success in non-contact center roles, non-core contact center roles. It's been driven by, any role that needs a computer, a desk, and an internet connection can be done here, and the access to the skills are here. So we've got trained accountants, we've got people doing accounts payable, we've got HR processes being managed from here, because we're providing an option and providing almost a host environment for anybody from overseas. And it can be run as a completely outsourced service where there's service levels and our responsibility, or it can be an extension of their team. So almost just facilitating that partnership to go on. I think that's going to extend. In my earlier point, there's more clients, there's more customers, more businesses are going to feel the pressure in the UK and need to make those decisions, and decisions that they didn't think they needed to. I think there was a question in the Q&A earlier around, are there internationals setting up here, or is it the services? Is it providers? And the majority are. Do need to understand the South African landscape. Kobus is setting this up for the 3rd time because he's an expert in what's required, and that's locations, that's the suppliers that you need to use, that's the market that you're going into, because it's an ecosystem. This isn't individuals working. We're collaborating just now as part of an industry body that's all aimed at driving down the unemployment in the youth in South Africa. And we can only do that if we're doing it successfully and collaboratively together, because I think we've all got similar suppliers and impact sourcing. There's a question coming up around the cost of property, but we're all after the same property. We're all after the same people. And I think it's really important that we work as an industry together. Otherwise, into a difficult position for the small, the medium, and the large. It really doesn't matter which fish. Even though I'm a toothpick for a whale, I think Kobus said there, there's a place for everybody.
Excellent. There's a really interesting question come in from John Devlin, who's sitting on a train somewhere in the UK. Posed the question to us, and I think I'm going to ask Kobus to respond on this one. John is saying, labor costs, property costs, operational costs, infrastructural costs in South Africa are also rising. And if we extrapolate that over the next 2 to 3 years, on the one hand, we've got rising costs in the UK, so greater opportunity for South Africa. But how do we manage the realities of rising costs in South Africa? The property one is a bit of a curveball there. I mean, you guys down in Cape Town must be feeling it. I know the chaps in KZN are feeling property number 1, and then also labor number 2. So Kobus, a quick response from you on how do we manage the realities of increasing costs in the South African context?
Yeah, John, I want to say to him, he's probably asking those questions because he's living it right now. It is a problem, not a problem, it's a challenge, I think. So for instance, when we set up the first operations for John, the rent was in Cape Town, if I remember correctly, 145 Rand a square meter. It is now on average around 185 Rand a square meter. And in fact, if you want to stay on a AAA around Cape Town, it's now going to 200, even above 200 per square meter. And the BPO industry and the foreign investment is stimulating that demand. Same property, nothing has changed. everybody is looking. We went to go and look at the property the other day, and the broker was literally having rotating doors with BPO companies coming in to look hour after hour. I think they're now doing like a doctor half an hour.
And
So
going to put it on auction.
Yeah, that is really a challenge. How we can overcome that challenge is go outside of those environments.
Yeah.
We got to start looking at and realizing we have other environments, we have other cities, or towns, or larger towns. If I look at the Cape Town environment, you have Mossel Bay, you have George, you have Port Elizabeth that people have sort of tried and not. Obviously, the challenge with those areas are middle management, team leaders, senior management, skills. It's not just agents. So we got to start looking outside of those high cost environments. On the skill side, it's also experiencing that. Neil was saying we're all going for the same skills because we have not created a much larger pool than the demand right now. So one of the areas we're gonna have to focus on is not just agent, academy, entry-based training programs. There's a lot of money going in there, but we've got to start looking at experiential side of things as well. Incubators. So you've probably seen that Trilogy starting the incubator next year, where it's actually a 12-month program where you get experience as well. You're taking calls and you're get used to being in the contact center, and we're partnering with local captives to be able to do that, because trying to take a person through just an academy with that NQF level 1 month training and put him into international campaign does not work right now. And we've tried it over and over. So you have to create a different level of experiential skills. So your academies need to morph into incubators. And that is one. And in that incubator, we have to create team leader skills, middle management skills, workforce management, QA. QA is going to shift big time, but I'm just saying sort of all those associated skills. Now, so John is right. If we want to supply this wave of demand, we're going to have to think very differently about that. Now, I have to just say at this point, everybody's saying, let's try and look at Africa now, or the rest of Africa. And then they say, Kobus, can you help us set up a center in Africa? No, Kobus won't help set up a center in Africa. But I say to them, instead of going to Africa, we can just go to other areas in South Africa, because at least we've got that middle management skills that we can migrate from a mature environment like Cape Town, a mature environment like Durban, a mature environment like Gauteng and Johannesburg. There's a lot of that middle management and senior managers who's working in captives today as well that would go and live there in those towns for a while. So it's easier to migrate skills in country than into Africa.
Well, if you have an opening for me in Knysna or Plet, I'm there for you. But I think you raised a good point, and I'm going to put it to both Neil and to William and to you as well, Kobus. For me, one of the most important sessions at the recent PAPESA conference was when the international analysts were up on the podium, on this platform, and they were talking about the elephants in the room. What are the things that are really wrong with the way we as an industry in South Africa are doing business or looking for business out there? Some of the issues were raised about the visa challenges, the skills shortages. So what are we doing wrong as an industry that we really need to put some energy into correcting if we're going to take this wave? I mean, one of the figures we haven't spoken about in today's session, but that 500,000 jobs by 2030 seems to be the banner that's being waved around. There's a long way to go between where we are now and 500,000 jobs. What do we need to do to get there? Neil, as a UK-based operator, what are we doing wrong?
So I think let's start a little bit more positively on some of the things that are going well from government and associated bodies. You look at the additional flights coming into to Cape Town. There's a recently added flight from Gatwick with North Air, so much more low cost. And we're already seeing some of our travel companies sending trainers, sending SMEs, because it's now more affordable. And I think, you know, Wesgrow and the like have worked tirelessly. There's loads that we're still looking for, and there's lots of people in influential positions saying, what can I do to help? And as soon as you ask, they start looking at their shoes a little bit. But there are opportunities. I think we need to look within the industry. We need to look within our supplier network to say, how can we work more powerfully together? How can we make sure that we're not in just pushing our prices up internally, meaning the end cost to our client is going up? Yeah. Kobus's stats around the accommodation and the property costs are so, and in Cape Town we've seen that shift, and we are based in the city centre, and we've taken the kind of privileged position of being in the protected grid right next to transport, but that comes and the cost then of transport and the cost of additional services in there. We need to be jointly thinking, there's a great opportunity for us, but let's not price ourselves out. And between landlords and the annual increments and the cost of living in South Africa is still pushing up. So our transport providers need to cover the cost of fuel and all the associated charges. So it's not necessarily that there's not any support, that the people are doing things wrong. I just think that there's more that we can do. And listen, the DTI are very comfortable in saying we're supporting this with grants. The grants need to flow through. You know, the grants are only worth money when they hit your bank account, and being approved and getting all the paperwork done, which isn't a small task, needs to actually see some fruits of it. And I think the last couple of years have been challenges based on the volume of new roles, I'm sure.
Particularly around the grants, you know, we have some challenges around a population that suddenly goes over the age limit of when those grants are awarded, and suddenly you've got someone that you can't get grant for. The visa element is absolutely a problem that I do think there is some movement and recognition of that being fixed. It's literally like having a door with one handle on one side. Yes, you can get in, but when you want people to get out and experience UK, as we had with a number of our retail clients, by being in the UK and experiencing what it is for the entire life cycle journey for the customer, so you can take that back to the teams in South Africa, that's problematic as well. And just coming back to, though, a point that Kobus made about Africa, and I absolutely agree with where South Africa is in its dominancy on the continent of Africa, but it really genuinely needs to look after that narrative, because there are places that the buyers of BPO services hear a lot about, from Ghana, from Nigeria, from Kenya, and nothing lasts forever. So there's a sense that, having been around the industry long enough to have seen South Africa start to have those shoots, and, you know, I've known Kobus a long time, and some of the people that brought those first outsourcing opportunities to the Cape, there is a genuine challenge that it's at the height of its narrative point at the moment, but it must, like an Apple, sustain that narrative. Just because you're Apple, or I was looking at an ad on the tube just yesterday for Jack Daniels. It never stops putting up Jack Daniels posters on the London Tube, and I've been there nearly 40 years. There's still a Jack Daniels tube and poster. It's still a black and white photograph. They dabbled with color a few years ago. That was okay. That's the thing that I think the PR engine, such as it is around South Africa, has to take stock of and never let down its guard. Otherwise, it will miss putting its dominancy above all others on the continent.
Okay, excellent. Kobus, you touched on it earlier, and you asked me to come back to it, which is the skills. Where do you stand on? I know you spoke briefly about academy, etc., but if we look at the industry right across South Africa, the shortages, where are we seeing shortages? Is it in the age? I don't see it in the agent level. Is it in the mid-management and the senior side? Where do you see it as a gap?
Yeah, I think the most critical area is actually very senior management. You know, for the larger campaigns, So I'm not surprised that quite a lot of the international BPOs bring their own people to South Africa, to support local teams. I mean, you can sort of count the, let's call it the senior managers or executive managers that can manage 1,000 plus FTEs. You can almost count on two hands. And if you want one of them, you have to pay more and more every single time for that. So I think there's an opportunity to really co-create with international companies to say, like, if we bring a client in, let's offer that to say, well, bring one of your experienced managers in. I hope Neil is okay with me explaining this. When we brought British Gas to South Africa that many years ago, Neil was the country manager who came in for British Gas. He decided to stay and look where he is today. Same with people like Gary Bennett. When we bring him from Virgin, he stayed. So a lot of the people actually, if you partner with your international clients, bring some of that skill on board here to help with that. And the other level is the middle management environment. So I know that it's going to change, it's going to be disrupted moving forward, but you're still going to have your WFM environments, your trainers, coaching. So all those support functions within our industry, we're running out of people there in a big way. So you have to train and skill development. You have to intern that within your own environment. Now, for smaller players, it's quite costly. And then obviously, because the industry is under high performance, contractual obligations, it's very difficult to intern and develop those skills in-house. So we need to, when government puts so much money out to just entry-level training, what we need to do is to say, whoa, we need to obviously get some money for that middle layer and sort of middle to senior management skills development as well.
Very good point. William, your colleague John Devlin raised a point. I saw it in a LinkedIn post yesterday about how decades as an industry, we've talked about the industry of bums on seats. The phrase which I saw yesterday was brains in heads. Is it a need for us to take a fundamental shift in the way we think intellectually about our industry, that we are adding value through intellectual capability rather than manual labor? But your views on that one? Because
100%. I mean, it came from listening to Mike Havard, who many people will know in our industry, a real luminary, but also a very much a serial investor in our industry for many, many years. And it made me realize that when we use that phrase, or when we allow that phrase to be used, we are immediately undermining the capacity, the capability of individuals to really get to a point of a career path, a standing in the industry. We talk about, let's bring in leadership management, and then we allow a client to talk about bums on seats rather than brains and heads. And that becomes a self-fulfilling negative prophecy, I think, for our industry. I know when, big brands used ad agencies in the 1980s, they didn't talk like bums on seats. We must be nearly the only industry that uses that phraseology. And it really doesn't help. And it really is something that I think we're all guilty of having allowed to form in the vernacular around the industry. But actually, if South Africa is probably in a unique position of cadence with the amount of business that's coming here, with the impact sourcing agenda that it already has well established with support from government, to actually try and say, let's go for a brains and heads aspect to what we're doing in BPO in South Africa and take that forward uniquely, because you've got the energy behind it, which the UK no longer has in some respects. And other places like perhaps India, the Philippines are perhaps more challenged because of language and elements that are distance related. I think South Africa really sits in a unique position to really bring that to fruition.
Excellent. Clinton Cohen, talking about energy. So Clinton, are you there? You can come in.
Thanks, Rod. Good morning,
There we
everybody.
go. Clint, I'm going to ask you to participate just with a couple of quick comments because we're coming up for the hour. Two hats, one as an operator viewing this industry same way as Neil and Kobus and William are, but also if you can put your BPO hat on, how is the association going to support this opportunity going forward? So Clinton, if you keep your comments fairly brief, I'd appreciate it, but over to you.
I'll wear the operator hat, and from our perspective, absolutely agree with what everybody said today. I think we all know South Africa being really poised to have significant growth in the near term. But what's been a key takeaway for me today is for us to not rest on our laurels. South Africa being the economic hub of Africa, and all the skills and all the challenges we have are not unique to South Africa, as every market's gone through them, be it the Philippines, be it India, be it anywhere in the world. But taking my hat off and putting the BPO hat on for a moment as our industry body, where the team on the call today has been absolutely instrumental, is the collaborative effort that needs to happen. Over the past, kind of decade, all the policies, all the frameworks are there, but if it's not supported, where the rubber hits the road, we can talk about all the initiatives, we're just going to degrade the absolute wonderful work we've done, and we need to surge forward with energy in making these things happen, be it the support from the DTR, be it the support through BPO as the industry body, bringing us all together and really getting skills development into schooling frameworks, getting operators supporting the initiatives to middle management where we know there's challenges. For our industry to kind of hold fast, we can afford some kind of cost degradation, because I think we'll still be competitive, but from business owners, we're continuously looking at those lines. So without hogging it, Rod, again, great to come in, great to give a voice to the esteemed panel here today that's done a tremendous effort in laying the narrative ahead for all of us. What a great session.
Great stuff. Thanks so much for your contributions on that. I think as you head towards wrap up, Neil, last words from you.
I think a key part, just to answer probably John's question and Kobus's concerns around senior leadership. We have seen, and I've been here 14 years. It was meant to be 6 weeks, so a little longer than I was planning. But it's a knowledge transfer that people are brought in to do. I think it's important that those people are held to account. As you come into the country and you're given the privilege of a visa to be here, what are you delivering and who are you bringing along that journey? And I can point to a number of individuals that have gone advisor to director of operations in my time, but that's maybe not the priority for everybody, because it takes patience. It takes time and investment in those individuals. And I think everybody's done a lot to bring entry-level roles in and probably get the team leaders of the future. It's about the senior leaders of the future. And that, whilst it's a small number, is so important, because it can help our expansion. And I think that does form, and answering again John's question, there's an element of that needs to be at industry level, because who's going to develop a program to create chief operating officers or ops directors of the future when it's 1s and 2s and 5s that you're dealing with? That needs to be a combined effort at industry level, and whether it's Cape BPO, BPO2SA, CCMG that are leading the march, it's something that needs to be collaborated on.
Excellent. William, your last words on that.
Last words really are, I absolutely see the future of SA being very bright, but it will come up increasingly stiff competition, both city within city. I've just seen that question from Bruce there. There are always challenges to paint the right visual for the city to attract, whether it's Joburg, whether it's one of the other cities around the Cape. And I think, just my point again is protect your narrative. Don't allow it to become the victim of other narratives in other countries, or indeed in other geographies around the world, because it is such a great story and such a in a boxed off way, something that is really, to Neil from London, getting easy. You've really got to be on top of that narrative, otherwise it will, as I've seen coming from Northern Ireland and 25 years ago, when our jobs were replacing the miners' jobs, would you believe, that something will eventually give up, and you really need to be on top of all of that for the very long term.
Excellent. And Kobus, it just strikes me that all three of you are sitting down with operations in Cape Town. I don't know if you know, we up here in Gauteng and Johannesburg have actually got a lot lower property rates, with more talent. And in fact, I've got a bigger whiskey bar than most people. So welcome to Joburg next time round. Kobus, last words from you quickly.
Yeah, I remember, Rod, I cut my teeth in Joburg. So all those years was in Joburg.
But you deserted us.
Yeah, no. So and Durban as well. We set up in Durban, and we actually never set up in Cape Town as CCN or Aegis on that side. But yeah, I just wanted to last. If we hear the feedback from like today's session, don't have a lot of international BPO operators into this, but listening to Neil and John and William, who are international, I definitely feel we have to defend and do more. So we now need to go into attack almost and say, if we as a mature environment don't pivot, if we don't change, and if we don't become dominant or keep our dominance as South Africa, then we're going to fall behind, because the messages going out there, to John's point, we've got to be more aggressive right now. I also feel we're not that aggressive in marketing South Africa, in where we're going and what we can help with and how we're shifting in this market. That I think we focus a lot of the local industry and all of that, but we need to get out there and we need to market a lot more and sort of safeguard our position in Africa.
Good stuff. Well, and then you're going to be supporting our BPO2SA campaign that we, as the people ask a question, what's it about? We support anybody that practices ethical BPO to South Africa. That's the position on it. Gentlemen, to wrap up on this, I will, by the way, be editing the video recording of this. I'll drop in the second video from Dave Rumble, which we didn't have time to run today, which addresses the impact of the Labour legislation in the UK. So some interesting stuff in there. And I'll put this link out to everybody who's registered and or attended. So please feel free to share. So Neil, thanks so much for making time today and sharing your insights on that. William, getting up so early, and I'm sure there was just coffee in that mug of yours, but thanks so much for sharing. And your colleague John Devlin on the train, thanks for your inputs, and Roz and Clinton for your inputs from the floor. And Kobus, once again, thanks so much. Great having you on this particular episode. And I think this is a topic that we should review from time to time, perhaps every quarter, and let's see what progress has been made. So to everybody on the call, thanks so much for A, registering, B, spending time with us today, and sincerely hope you got value from it. I will also, thanks to ChatGPT, produce a white paper coming out of this session. It will also be out this afternoon, and we look forward to bringing more and more BPO to SA. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rod.
Thanks everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kobus.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Cheers,
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.